Hey friends, how are you? I am good. I'm enjoying a little bit of fall beauty. The weather is wonderful here in the 60s Fahrenheit, that is, and it's just really sunny and bright, and the colors are popping. So I really love this time of year. It's my favorite time of year, and I hope it's beautiful and lovely weather where you are. So let me dive into week 7, day 1, Romans 11, 5 through 8 was the passage. So too at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. But if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace. What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see and ears that would not hear, down to this very day. And I had 2 questions on this day. I'm going to start with the second question and share some of the thoughts people had on that so we don't get confused by it. My question was based on my interpretation, which was in the book. Verse 8 is about God bringing his justice in his time and way. If this is true, how does this compare to when a man brings justice against lawbreakers? And this was sort of a stumper for a lot of you. Maybe I just didn't explain it very well, but here are the thoughts after I clarified a little bit midway through the week. Erica said, I think we can seek justice from the hurt and anger. We want the people who did wrong to be punished and the people wrong to be compensated somehow. We also like it to be swift. For us to extend mercy as the wrong party does not come naturally to us, but God seeks justice because he is just. He is able to offer mercy because that is his character. Later in verse 22, it says he is kind and stern. His motives are holy. I can't wait to hear others' thoughts. Yeah, in order to be holy in this fallen world, I'm so grateful that God is both kind and stern, gracious and a truth-telling God, a truth, truth resultant God. I don't know how else to say it. He brings the truth. Christ was the truth. So we're thankful for that and thankful for the way he can strike that tension. Becky had a comment on that day. She said, Erica, I have to agree with you here. Also, my justice expects that wrong done to me needs to be made right. And the way to make it right is to have the other person suffer just as much, if not more, as I feel I have. And she added, God's justice also includes righting a wrong. The wrong is sin, which completely separated us from him. His justice involves bringing us the wrong back in his holiness. This is good stuff. Always good questions, Beth. Thank you. And back to what you said there, Becky, about we want that justice, and it's a reflection of God's image in us. We want things to be right. We want things to be true. So often, though, we take that right and we kind of pull it towards what we want and desire, and that's when it gets contaminated by our sin nature, our selfish nature. So really what we're seeing with God and when he brings his justice is sort of a reflection of who he's created us, wired us to be, a reflection of him. So Iris said on this day, God will provide the ultimate justice for all situations, but if we lived in a society that ignored all wrong, doing it would become wrong. Doing it would become unbearable. I see our justice system as an effort to fight back, to see bits of God's justice, mercy, love, and compassion in the world in which we live, not only in the decisions that are made, but in giving believers the opportunity to be Jesus all throughout the process. I like that statement, being Jesus all throughout the process of God's justice and God's mercy. I mean, we can reflect both of those things to the world, and that's what we need to be doing. So, yeah, thank you for that, Iris. That was great. I added, here's my thought on justice. I see so many similarities between our justice systems and God's. So, Erica, you were on the right track about righting wrongs. I think that's what God is intending to do, is doing. What society would we have if righting wrongs was not a part of our judicial system? Yet so many look at God's justice as unloving. I see it as protective, corrective, and satisfying, calming his wrath, just as ours seeks to do the same for victims and an injured society. There is something good about receiving justice for wrongs done against us. It's not a vengeful kind of thing that I'm talking about there. It is just satisfying, correcting that wrong. So I think it's a good thing. And then I said, I don't know why we don't trust the one who embodies perfect justice, trusting him to exact his justice in his way. I know these are theoretical and theological ramblings that can be fiercely tested when someone we love is punished by God for unbelief. And by the way, I don't think God punishes believers. I think God punishes unbelievers ultimately when they reject Christ. But, and that's that unbelief. I think God disciplines believers. Back to my thought. I bristle at the thought, knowing that that could be true of those I love. I wrestle with this often, yet at the end of the day, I want to trust God more. I want to stretch my faith, trusting he knows best in every situation and with every person. Yeah, there are people that I love that I feel are not pursuing God like they should, or maybe even outright rejecting God. I don't know what's in their heart. And so I struggle with this because I know God is going to deal with that one way or the other if they don't turn to him. So, I mean, I feel this. I don't want to see God bring justice in those situations because I love that person and he loves them too. But there are things that we need to do, God needs to do, to make things correct and right in the most loving way. And he's offered the most loving answer by sending his son. So we cannot in any way criticize him when he sacrificed Christ for us. Iris had a comment on this day. She said, grace is God's, this is in response to, sorry, missed the question. This was my first question actually. What makes grace qualify as grace? And what does this say about God's choice to save a remnant of Jews? Not at all. Iris said, grace is God's benevolence to me and the world. It is never earned. It is never based on my productivity or acceptability. That's a breath of fresh air for this. My worth is in what I do, girl. And I'm right there with you, Iris. I really fight that urge a lot of the time. Erica said, grace must be free and undeserved, or it is not grace. We forget to be thankful because we deserve death, but he is merciful. I see why no one else has commented because this is hard. The hardening comes when we push against God. The more we reject him and his teaching, the harder our heart becomes, refusing to absorb his truth. The ability to see and understand the things of God are removed. And that's probably in a response to what does it say about God's choice to save a remnant of Jews? And not all, because God made that hard, he drew that hard line in the sand and does have to bring his justice. And that's really on us because like, I think it was Erica said, they are hardening their hearts against God. So Becky had a comment on this day. She said, I agree, Erica. I've been thinking on these questions all day. I still don't think I have a good answer because grace is something that is not earned or deserved. It makes grace so very special and unbelievable. I know it humbles me. God is all powerful and in complete control of his universe. So when he chooses to extend grace to whoever he chooses, wow, what a blessing and honor. So yeah, it is a blessing and honor. And I would add to that, every blessing we receive in life is God's grace. That's an example. Anything that's good in this life is because of God's grace in action. And here I wrote out what I was going to say. Let's see. But it's not just about the saving gift of grace. And I wanted to make that a little bit of a distinction here. We're talking about saving grace, but we're also talking about God's grace that he uses, that he extends really to unbelievers as well. Often we reject it. Often we don't the unbeliever doesn't recognize that it comes from God. And if they do, they don't give their lives to God unless they come to that point of saving faith, which I hope and pray they do. But I think there are so many examples of God's grace, and even just this series that I'm doing in Romans, naming it Grace Covers, Grace Helps, Grace Extends, Grace Unites. I wanted us to see the multifaceted, it's like a diamond. It has many facets that shine God's grace, and all of them come from God and do not come from us. Every blessing we receive, we can't take credit for, because ultimately he's giving us grace, the power to do whatever that is. So when we experience grace, when we see grace, we're seeing the face of God. That's the bottom line. So just wanted to leave you with that thought. On week 7, day 2, we read Romans 11:9 through 11. And David says, let their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see, and bend their backs forever. So I asked, did they stumble in order that they might fall? This is Paul asking. By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles so as to make Israel jealous. And then I asked, what good things has God given you in life that have become a snare to you at times? Again, I separated the questions because I had 2 on this day. And Erica said, when schools began to be virtual and hybrid a few years back, our family decided to homeschool. I had felt God telling me to do it, and I made excuses not to until the schools were shifting. I ran out of excuses. It has definitely been one of the hardest things we've done. Way too much to type here, but good from the bad for sure. I'm glad you saw the good, God redeeming that time, maybe bringing in a bond with your kids that you wouldn't have had if you just sent them to school, and maybe stretching you and growing you in ways that you weren't expecting to, Erica. I'm gathering that from what you've just shared. Becky said, God has given me a gift of mercy for others, and I see their hurt. I want to be able to help them move past it. The snare that comes with this is I can easily move into a fix-it mode and start working hard to do for them what they need to be doing for themselves. I am learning to use this gift of mercy to understand, relate, pray for, and love people in a healthier way. And I'm glad God is redeeming that too. He often takes those things that we let get out of balance, or even things that we're tempted to do out of a good intention, but it turns into sin because we're doing it in our own strength, or we're doing it out of bad motives. But yeah, he can take that and redeem it, turn it around, and help us learn how to express that in a healthier way, like Becky said. Linda said, I have the gift of hospitality, and I do love cooking and entertaining and opening our home to others when needed. She's doing it this weekend, by the way. But it can also become a burden when too many things come at once, like this weekend. She was asking me for prayer in that regard, and I could totally, I mean, I don't know how this woman does it, because I would be so stressed out by all the entertaining and the extent of entertaining she does. She's just so gracious and welcoming, and so that's great. But anyway, she said, I have to rely on God's grace to get me through sometimes without becoming anxious. I always want everything to be perfect, but I need to let it go and rely on him. So I hope you were able to do that, Linda. I hope it was just a really relaxing, enjoyable event for everybody, including you, and that you got to soak up those moments of friendship and fun, and it was a refueling thing for you rather than a depleting thing. Another question I had on this day is, what good things has God brought out of what seemed bad in your life, or generally in your life, in all of your life? And I think I've already answered some of those questions, but here's what Erica said. The heart is good for me to not get too comfortable. I think comfort can be a snare for me, and God uses my kids, health things, relationships to humble me and remind me that I am not here for me or my comfort. I need a lot of reminders. I am studying in 1 Peter about fiery trials, burning away parts of us and molding us into holiness. Wishing those suffering times away instead of growing with God through them takes away my opportunity for us, an opportunity for us to be a part of his glory in it. Yeah, we miss out on so much when we resist what God wants to do and teach us how we can experience him in that really difficult moment. Coming closer and helping us it's a treasure, and often we despise it because of the pain. So instead of going towards the pain, we need to lean into his comfort and strength. Thanks for that, Erica. Becky said, and the good that comes out of what seemed bad is way too much to go on about. God continues to show up and make the ugly beautiful. My divorce truly rocked my world and continues to have me hitting my knees when intense emotions of hurt and betrayal arise. The beauty in it is God is constant and he never leaves me. Amen. I am learning to embrace and trust fully in that truth. It provides a comfort that is unexplainable. Yeah, peace that passes understanding. So yeah, I get that, Becky. And I'm so glad that you're feeling that from the Lord through these rocky moments. You're on a roller coaster, and I hope that you're holding on to him. Linda said, the first thing that comes to my mind is our move to the home where we live now. Our other home didn't sell for 5 years. She mentioned this last week. It was during the recession, and we ended up taking it off the market. When it was God's timing, we sold and moved to a much nicer home he had picked out for us than we had chosen earlier. He even arranged for the cost of the new home to be nearly exactly what we made on our other home. We have a very similar story here with this home. It was a lot more expensive to buy, but because the taxes are so much better here in North Carolina, at least on homes anyway, than Illinois, our mortgage is virtually the same. So that was a way we could make it. We could buy here in North Carolina during such a crazy real estate time. So I'm grateful for what God has done in that. I had another question on this day. What are examples of situations in life that are best left to play out without us intervening, and why? And Linda said, the part I need to leave in God's hands, question number 2, is trying to change, and this is, I guess, question number 2, is trying to change people, even if it's with the best of intentions. Good intentions usually mean I have stepped into God's territory. Good rule of thumb. You know, we have these great intentions, but as soon as we characterize it as that, most likely it's us stepping in, doing something in our own strength. She said, I just want to help him out, want to help God out. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know why we feel like we need to help God out. I'm certain it has something to do with the level of faith that we have. And so that's a struggle for me as well, Linda. Thanks for sharing. And she also added, I want to fix issues in the lives of my grown children and grandchildren. I'm coming to the realization that it's better to just pray about it and give it to God. I'm right there with you on that too. Although there are times I try to stay open to when God might prompt me, but very often he doesn't prompt me when I think he should, or as often as I think he should. Most of the time he's prompting me to pray and just remain silent and love them, you know, affirm them, let them know that I'm a safe place. So I join you in that struggle, Linda. Becky said, God has given me a gift of mercy for others, and I see their hurt. I want to be able to help them move past it. The snare that comes with this is I can easily move into fix-it mode and start working hard to do for them what they need to do for themselves. I'm learning to use this gift of mercy to understand, relate, pray for, and love people in a healthier way. I may have mentioned that one before. Maybe I copied and pasted it again, but we're grateful, Becky, for your heart to help others. I've experienced it. You've helped me in a lot of ways and shown compassion to me over the years. And yet I know that sometimes that can be a snare. So I'm praying for you that God helps you balance that in the relationships and the challenges of your life going forward. On week 7, day 3, we read Romans 11:12 through 15. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their inclusion mean? Now, I'm speaking to you, Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry in order somehow to make my fellow Jews jealous and thus save some of them. For if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead? I think that's a really powerful passage there. And so I asked a couple of questions on this day. Why do you think Paul magnified his ministry to the Gentiles? And how can jealousy help the Jews to turn to Jesus for salvation? What does it bring into focus? Linda on this day said, I think he included the Gentiles because God told him to do that. I mean, I think that's true. I think, and I think she's talking about Paul, that he wanted to reach out to them, and God called him to that. So he was faithful to that. She added, I think perhaps when the Jews saw how faith in Jesus changed the lives of their fellow Jews, and then even the Gentiles, they might be jealous that they missed out. They thought that they were superior to the Gentiles, so they would feel jealous to be passed over in favor of the Gentiles. Yeah, I think they knew that. That was drummed into their head that they were the chosen people. It was a really hard turn for them to recognize God is a gracious God, and he wants to be more inclusive, especially when the Jews were rejecting Christ. So he had every reason to do that. Erica said, Paul is so excited for the Gentiles. His ministry and calling is specifically to share the gospel with the Gentiles. He is working alongside God to reach these people and us. If you're a Gentile, I'm a Gentile. I wonder if the Jews see the lives changing in the Gentile communities, like Linda mentioned, and re-examine their beliefs, wanting to live in the freedom they see in these people. I think probably underneath all of the jealousy, there was that thought that, wow, look at what God is doing in the Gentiles' lives. It's got to be real, but it just doesn't compute, because I always thought I was the only one. I was a chosen child, that the Jewish nation was the only nation that would receive the grace of God. That must have been running through their minds, and such a, roller coaster of emotions there. Here's what I said. I mentioned in the book, Magnifying Paul's Ministry to the Gentiles created the space for grace to draw both people groups to Christ. I think that's an important part that we need to remember. It allowed for more room for others to come to faith in Christ. And I also said it also woke the Jews from their stupor, which Paul mentioned earlier in verse 8. If you look back at verse 8, you'll see that. So it's an example of the first intervention of an addict, let's say, where if there was an intervention, you would have truth bombs being thrown at you. You would have people saying, here's what I'm experiencing, and here's what you're doing in response to what I'm experiencing about you. God brought the Gentiles into this grace to not the Gentiles. He brought the Gentiles in to his redemptive grace so that the Jews would sober up and recognize that not only are they his chosen people, but now the Gentiles who have received Christ are his chosen people as well. That's a humbling thing, but it's also a thing that can help us draw closer to Christ, to recognize the immense cost of his life, not just for the Jew, but for the Gentile. I hope you're staying engaged with this study. We're drawing near to the end. There's only 9 weeks in the Grace Extends study. So we will take a little break for the holidays. I'm not sure if I'll do anything. I might do something a little bit lighter, or I might not do anything and I'll just give you a break and start back in January with the final book in the series, Grace Unites. We'll finish out through chapter 16 of Romans, and it's a really powerful last chapter that we will be, not just chapters, powerful last chapter to this series, let me put it that way. So I hope you're staying engaged and growing in your faith and applying these principles, learning who God is, and coming to the place of trusting him in every situation. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next week.